Good morning. It's wonderful to have the head of the Jobs Fund here, Najwah Allie-Edries.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Yes, so we're very excited to have you here because in our country, with the unemployment rates that we have in our country, it's wonderful to know that there's something like the Jobs Fund, which is creating jobs for people. And you've been going for quite a while, and you've created many jobs. So we want to hear about you and how your path led to the Jobs Fund, and more about the Jobs Fund. So over to you.
Thank you so much. I guess one starts with one's personal mission in life. And for me, I've always wanted to make a positive difference to people at the basic need level. And I think that in terms of the career I've always been fortunate to have opportunities that allowed me to do that. I mean, I started out as a labour researcher at the Southern Africa Labour and Development Research Unit. I went on to work for the Development Bank of Southern Africa, and then
Are you looking for good photos for your fresh produce? Like this beautiful kiwis we're standing in. Just come and look at our stock site. These photos will probably be on there sometime, and then you can come and buy them.
I also worked at the South African Revenue Service, heading up the transformation program. And that was really exciting stuff because, it's like your work is purpose driven, and that is what drives me. And I eventually ended up at the National Treasury, and I used to work on social security and retirement reform until I was invited to head up the Jobs Fund. And I was very blessed when I got that opportunity. Really resonated with, what my personal mission statement is all about.
That is wonderful. And to actually, when you heard about the Jobs Fund, you must have been super excited because, you couldn't be more perfect for the job with that background.
Yeah, so it was a funny old thing, hey, as they say. I was, the president had, in his State of the Nation, had indicated that they would be establishing a jobs fund. And of course, it would be the responsibility of the Minister of Finance. We had said that we were going to do it. And then the minister said, well, now, what's the progress? Okay. And it was Minister Gordhan at the time.
And the president at that stage?
The president was Jacob Zuma.
Okay.
But he made a statement, and of course it was for the department to implement. And I think if you know Praveen, a really driven man, gave his heart and soul to the country. And very impatient as well. I had the good fortune of working with him when I headed up the transformation of SARS. What's the progress? Where are you? What's being done? How much is it going to cost? Who's doing what? And so with the Jobs Fund, he said, well, we've made this announcement, so what's the progress? So my manager at the time, Andrew Donaldson, a real stalwart in public finance, came to me and said, can you go and find out where we are? And
did he ask you that?
Yes, he came to me because we were going to let it happen and through the Development Bank, because the Development Bank reported in to the Minister of Finance, and there was an established structure, and we thought we'll get traction really quickly, but I would then be responsible for managing the team at the DBSA. And off I went to the DBSA, asked, so where are we? What's happening? There's going to be a media briefing next week. And yeah, that's how it started.
Wow.
It was incredible because, I had the good fortune to get in right at the start, and I was able to be a part of designing the operating framework for the fund, work with the DBSA in refining their processes. And within a very short space in time, we were able to do a media launch. We'd worked quietly in the background, setting up a website, getting the criteria for funding sorted, all of those good things. But when you have intent and you've got common purpose and you have drive and you have vision and you have a willingness to get the job done, then things get done. And, for the first 2 years, the fund was based at the DBSA. And then, the DBSA is still a bank, right? And they still have that framework. But with the Jobs Fund, unemployment at the time in 2011, very high. I mean, who knew that it would climb and be as high as it is now? I mean, 8 million people unemployed, right? Almost 5 million young people unemployed. And when we established with Fund, we said we needed to do things differently. We needed to innovate. We needed to find like-minded partners. And so we said, okay, we're going to operate from the bank. We're going to get traction, but we had a greater risk appetite. And it might sound strange that government had a bigger risk appetite, but there it was. And we brought the fund back into the National Treasury, and yes, we continued. But the whole idea about the fund was to address barriers in the labor market and make sure that the way in which we created jobs, that was demand driven and that those jobs would be sustainable.
So when the president made this announcement, was anybody aware of it? Has there been talks amongst the people that, okay, right, Jacob Zuma's going to make the announcement that there must be a jobs fund? Did anybody know, or was it a surprise to everybody?
Oh no. This week is fortuitous. There's a budget, right? Okay. On Wednesday. And now, in respect of the budget process, there would be discussions about how to allocate funds. And at the time, the National Treasury officials had thoughts about, what a meaningful intervention would look like in the market. And those proposals went to the Ministers' Committee on the Budget. So before any money is allocated, you would go to the Ministers' Committee on the Budget. They will listen to the proposals together with every other department's proposals, right? And then their recommendations would be made by the Ministers' Committee, and it would be taken to the President, and then they would sign off on it. So there was a discussion, and before the establishment of the fund, we looked broader, right? So the Jobs Fund was the biggest challenge fund that was established at the time globally. 9 billion rand was allocated. But we looked at what other countries were doing, where, they'd started this idea of challenge fund. And with the challenge fund, you have no ready-made answers. You know that you have a problem, you know that you have a challenge, but you put that out to the market and you see how the market responds. And you competitively then assess all those applications. And it's a very transparent process as well, where you identify the eligibility criteria, the impact criteria. You say, we have an unemployment problem. We are looking for innovative solutions to address this unemployment problem. We are looking for partnerships. We are open to take risk with you, but that risk must be appropriately allocated, right? So that really is, and we don't tell you how to do it. We're actually asking you to think about what is the best way. But to come back to your question, there's the budget process. There was research into what other countries were doing and whether those modalities had success. We had a small experiment, proof of concept in South Africa at the time. And then, there was the announcement that there would be a jobs fund. The mechanics of that was not done yet, okay? We knew that we had an unemployment challenge. We knew we needed partnerships, that government didn't have all the answers. We knew that we needed to encourage risk-taking and innovation. But the way that the fund would operate, when I got invited to a little coffee to say we're going to make this announcement, we hadn't finalized all that detail yet. And so the challenge was to get people who had been exposed to challenge funds, put together a think tank. How best do we do it? How do we draft the operating framework? How do we draft a term sheet that would attract the private sector, right? Because the Jobs Fund is a matching grant facility. And so what makes it attractive for them? What makes it attractive for us? Within a very short space of time, we were able to put down the operating framework, term sheet, and right at the beginning, we knew, because we wanted to do, we wanted to test new ideas, right? We knew that we needed to have a very robust monitoring and evaluation framework. So that, I think that was also different in respect of a government program. That framework was set up right at the beginning. So people knew, we told them how we defined a job, we told them what they would be required and how they would be required to perform. All of those things were made, very transparent up front.
Sure.
It was exciting though. It was really exciting.
I can imagine, but if you think about this new government that we've got, and they've got all these fantastic promises and things, why doesn't it feel like things are moving quite as fast as like what you're explaining you guys had to go through? Why can't it be done again?
I think it can be done, and I think that there are avenues where it is being done. But I think, as I said before, you need people who have drive. You need people who have vision. You need people who believe in the country and who want to make that difference, right? And for the Jobs Fund, I mean, we've got more than 180 partners and interventions. It wasn't easy. When we started the fund, there was a run on the fund. People thought, oh, here's a government initiative, free money, let's go. Well, we very quickly disabused them of the notion that it is free money. It ain't free money. We wanted them to have skin in the game, and that is why there was a matched funding component, right? If you ask us for 10 million, you match us with 10 million, right? And I think that over time, and it did take time, it's a question of how do you build trust. At the moment, trust in government is very low, right? But even at that time, people would say, government, what do you guys know? Corruption, you kind of clock watchers and all of those kind of things. But if you have the right mix of people with the right vision, the right intent, right, you can make it happen. You absolutely can make it happen. And when you do, so it was important when we said the fund was open for business, right? We had to be predictable. We had to be very transparent how we evaluated an application, right? We were looking for value for money. We were looking for sustainability. We were looking for innovation, right? And we were looking at what was the model that the job creation model that they would introduce, right? Was there sustainability? Because the grant was supposed to be catalytic. It was supposed to come in as a once-off grant, and it needed to crowd in expertise and other sources of funding so that there was sustainability. Yeah. So, and when you say to people, this is what we want, this is what we evaluate you on, this is when you get paid, when you deliver X, Y, and Z. And then you actually pay them when you said you were going to pay them, right? All of those things people know up front. And so people then began to recognize that this Jobs Fund, they mean business. When they say to us, you have to deliver 80% of your targets before you can draw down the next tranche of your funding. And they actually do, and they receive it. So that whole payment kind of program, that is hardwired from day one. So what do? We say one of the key things that have hindered the implementation of programs is because people are cash starved, right?
Yeah.
So when we contract with you, so firstly there's a whole governance process. You submit your application, there's a hard close, right? And then the competition begins. My team, we sit back and we evaluate. So I have financial analysts, legal people, agricultural specialists, or whatever industry.
And this is once a year.
Yeah. So on average, once a year, we've been able to open up a fund drive. So we assess those applications, and then on top of it, we have an independent technical evaluation committee, right? So we get independent experts who tell us you didn't see this or you didn't see that. You could make this program better like that, okay? From that, we would then go to our investment committee. The investment committee, again, very different in the way a government tender would offer, because these are independent people from the private sector and elsewhere, and they bring their expertise to bear on the application before us. So in that, there's also checks and balances, right? My team and I, if we had inclinations to be corrupt, we don't have the final say on who gets allocated money. It's the independent experts. But once they've said yes to it, there's a very detailed implementation plan and a budget, and it's broken down quarter by quarter. And we will then look at the first quarter, how much seed money do you require to get going, right? And we would make an advance, but you would also match us on that amount. And that is how we proceed quarter by quarter. Next quarter, you meet 80% of your targets. You put your matched funding into a ring-fenced bank account, and we put ours when yours is there, and we've checked the evidence. That is how we began to build trust in the market. And so, that then allowed us, when we opened up a funding round, for more people to then trust in this process. And, I'm under no illusion. They would say to us, my God, you are stringent, right?
Well,
But it's public money. It's public money. And often, the relationship starts like, why is government being so tough? Why this, why that, right? But we work with the private sector, and we work with the non-profit sector, and we work with government. And often, people would come back and say, you were so stringent, right? But because of the processes that you wanted us to put in place, we are now able to go out and ask for funding elsewhere, because we've got track record that we can demonstrate. So yes, we're tough, but man, I'm scared to waste government's money. It's taxpayers' money, and not on my watch, and not on my team's watch.
Everybody can agree with that. Everybody can be grateful and agree with that. So you published a publication last year, 10 years of the Jobs Fund. It came out last year. So are there any particular successes you'd like to share with us?
I don't want to favor anybody. Yes. I think and I think there's a way of thinking about success, and the way in which we think about success is that even if a project did not achieve what they needed to achieve, but there were strong lessons that came from that, and they incorporated those lessons and moved forward, that's still successful.
Yes.
When others adopt what people are doing, right? There's success in that. And so in terms of success, we've worked in the informal economy. We've got a project called A to Pay, where we work with spaza shop owners. And we supported the purchase of infrastructure for the spaza shops, and together with business development and training for the spaza shop owners. And that has now mushroomed across many informal settlements and in township economies. So that has been really good. We've worked with a project called Unjani Clinics, right? So we all know that primary healthcare is a major challenge in our country. And this project was able to demonstrate that in partnering with the private sector, we were able to deliver primary healthcare in communities. And that was simply through identifying a qualified nursing sister that lived in a particular area, giving her the business skills to operate her clinic as a business. And then it was a metal container that was kitted out with the basic kind of things to do basic primary health testing and so forth. And the idea was that they would operate this at a cost that was viable for the community that they served, but also that they would make a profit. And today, some of those nurses have acquired more clinics in neighboring communities. And so, having that kind of impact at community level in the health space was really awesome. We've done similar things in early childhood development. And then we've done big things with asset managers and financial firms, where we've used the grant as a guarantee, with Regulation 28, pension funds and where they can invest. There are prescriptions and prescribed assets and all of those things. And in our project with Ashburton, asset managers, on a very small guarantee, and the way in which you structured the guarantee is also that public money is taken care of, but against a very small guarantee of about 80 million, they were able to raise from the market for small business development 10 times more than that amount of money.
Wow.
And so, really using the grant as a catalyst. What we see as SAYouth.mobi today, this major platform where young people can go on, understand what is happening in terms of what jobs are available, but also get training and exposure. That is something that came out of the Jobs Fund stable. There was a project called Harambe. It was a train young people on skills that were in demand, and having employers who wanted to employ. So that's very much, in the Jobs Fund, we don't train for the sake of training. There must be demand for the job. So in this program, young people would be identified. And what was also different is that we have, these normal proxies. You must have matric, you must have a university degree. Some of us don't have that, but there are other proxies that will indicate whether we, able to conduct ourselves well in a workplace. And so using those proxies, understanding what employers want, having a bridging program, helping young people to prepare themselves for interview, and then ending that up in a placement, right? So we were instrumental in building the capacity, the institutional capacity. And today, when we have the Teachers Assistance Program, the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention, all of these new interventions could use this platform and scale rapidly. So that's just, the kind of thing that we want to do. In agriculture, that brings joy to me. Finance is always a challenge, right? But we've partnered with Hort Grow and established Hort Fin, right? And that is going to be an evergreen fund for the deciduous fruit industry. But it wasn't just about money, right? It was about creating access to market, and it was about making available the technical assistance and the technical support that our new era farmers required. And then, of course, through the funding and the initial funding provided by the Jobs Fund, Hortfin has now been able to attract funding from FNB, from ABSA, from Nedbank, and other financial institutions. So now we've created a legacy fund. When the Jobs Fund steps away, there's a facility that would be available for farmers in the deciduous fruit industry. So those are just a few of the things, and I hope that as I've spoken, it's really about finding the innovation and finding like-minded partners and de-risking it for them up front in order for them to come back and say, well, okay, this actually works. So you experiment and you demonstrate. And when you demonstrate success, people are then happy to adopt.
I've got a whole few questions.
Sorry.
Go.
It's very interesting. So it's as part of the question. I just want to clarify. If you talk about partners, that's people that make use of the fund or that work together with you, or is that people that provide funds for the fund?
So I spoke about our application process, right?
Yes.
And we asked for matched funding. And so when our applicants come, they will say they have match funding from the Land Bank, or they have match funding from F&B, or they have match funding from a philanthropic organization, right? But they would bring other sources of funds, okay? So when we then partner with an intermediary, and that is the way in which you operate as a fund, it is very difficult. We don't have like massive capacity to go and work with individual projects on the ground. But if we work with specialists and intermediaries in the market, like a Hoard Grow is an intermediary. PELS, you guys are familiar with PELS. It's another partner of the Jobs Fund. If we work with those intermediaries, they have deeper reach.
Yes.
Okay. So there's an application, there's match funding. We would contract with Hoard Grow. We would contract with PELS and others. That is then the partnership, okay? And we then look in that partnership, who is getting what, okay? So that's a very critical thing for us.
Okay.
When we partner with somebody, at the end of the day, the bulk of the benefit must flow to the end beneficiary.
Yes.
So you can come on board as the private sector, you can come on board as an NGO, you can come on board as a public entity. You will bring your match funding with you, right? We will then look at how the project is structured. Because at the end of the day, because it's public money, most of the benefits must flow to the end beneficiary.
Yes.
Yeah? So that's what I mean by partnership.
Okay.
There's an application and it's a competitive process, and through that process our partners will also bring their own funds, whether it be loan funding or other sources of funding, together with our funding.
Okay. So I just want to see if I understand it correctly. So for instance, if an industry body in agriculture, be it Hoard Grow, CGA,
Yes.
one of those, they will approach a job. So they would say, we've got 4 new entrant farmers that we would like to support.
Yes.
They're going to need plant material and a tractor and what. Then they present that to you, and then you guys will make a decision if you would partner with that body. But that body administrates everybody.
That's right.
That is your partner.
Yes. So with CGA, for example, a marvelous, like an absolutely fantastic project, right? It was about empowerment, right? And so there was the industry body, and it said it wanted to do things differently as well, okay? And they came to the Jobs Fund and they applied for a grant. And we said, how do you want to use this grant? Okay, you're going to have money and we're going to have money in this, and we're going to blend our money so that there's a preferential rate that goes to the farmers, right? But in addition to that, you CGA, what are you going to do to de-risk this investment? De-risking that investment is making sure that there's technical support, that there's access to markets, that there's appropriately structured finance that goes into the project, right?
Yes.
But at the end of the day, we've contracted with CGA and they will administer, and we will ask them, so which projects are you going to be supporting and where are these projects? And we would do an analysis of the feasibility of where they want to go to and what they want to do with the money.
I see. Okay. So would you get applications like, if I send in an application now, I need money to expand my business. Is that something you would look at, or would I have a lesser chance of?
So, well, that really does depend, okay? And I'm not an economist, but I was saying it depends on the one hand. So,
I'm just curious. Because
the idea is to create jobs.
People are going to listen to this, and that might be
a question that they think about.
Yeah.
Of course. So you're going to come to us and you're going to say, I want to create new jobs in the economy. And I am happy to either be employing those people myself, or I am going to be creating a facility where they are going to be trained and then they're going to be absorbed elsewhere. Okay. So nothing's off the table. We consider everything, right? But we get more traction, and often projects that are more competitive are projects that have deeper reach and wider reach. We do have sometimes individuals, and they come and we look at it and they, no, this is balance sheet funding. That's not what we're about. We need to catalyze and new areas of new jobs, right? It really is just a competitive process, but nothing's off the table.
Oh, interesting.
We are here as agricultural journalists and agricultural media. You've touched on, you spoke about Woodgrow and you spoke about CGA. As a broader picture, the agricultural sector, it's such a big employer of people. It must be a very important sector of the economy for the Jobs Fund. Do you want to expand on that for us, please?
Absolutely. I mean, we support more than 50 interventions in the agriculture space. We've created over the life of the fund now more than 87,000 jobs.
Wow. In agriculture?
In agriculture. Wow. We have allocated in excess of 2 billion towards agriculture projects, and we have used that 2 billion to leverage in excess of 3 billion towards agriculture. We have supported more than 16,000 emerging farmers, trained more than 48,000 people, and agriculture for us is a really important sector. It's important because it has the ability to create jobs, but importantly, we have a skills mismatch in our country, right? And in agriculture, semi-skilled and unskilled labor, you can bring that into that particular sector with, appropriate training. So there's that importance. The importance in respect of food security, right? Also, the fact that in agriculture, we are able to reach into deep rural spaces. And so through our intervention, we can ensure that there is greater levels of economic inclusion and reduction in poverty. And then, of course, is the climate aspect, right? So from that perspective, we see agriculture as a really important sector, but we recognize that traditional financiers also see that as major risk, and that is why we want to use our grant as a catalytic instrument that attracts other funding sources, but also allows, when those funding sources come into play, we, through our grant, de-risk the initial investment. Through our grant, we facilitate and enable them through a blending mechanism to charge interest rates that are less than they would normally have. And through our grant, we enable them to be more patient. I mean, if you're going to establish a new orchard, right, it takes 7 years plus, right? It's not going to happen overnight. You're going to be supporting emerging farmers, smallholder farmers. You've got to help them and structure your finance appropriately. So you want to make a grant available, right? But then you want to track their performance, and you want to say to them, this is the performance level that you have to get to. These are the sustainable farming practices that you have to implement, right, to get you there. So it's a journey. It's a journey that you have to walk, and the Jobs Fund grant.
Especially for new entrants or
absolutely
first generation farmers as the...
Absolutely. So our grant allows the traditional sources of finance to be a little bit more patient, as they should be, to get these farmers on their feet, right, to get their processes right, to get them access to proper farming inputs, to get them access to market, to standardize their product. And then once they are doing that and they become more sustainable, perhaps you then give them a loan, right? But it's a non-repayable loan. And as they grow further, you could give them some another loan, but a smaller interest rate. And that is the way in which you have to build. And that is what we do with the Jobs Fund grant.
Sure.
Wow.
Do you have another? Because I've got questions.
I want to ask you, you said at the beginning, you said that the Jobs Fund was one of the biggest challenge funds internationally. And if you look at the 10-year history of the Jobs Fund, or 10 more year history of the Jobs Fund, on an international perspective, how has your progress compared to anything else that's out there internationally? I'm asking this question because of our country's particularly high unemployment rate. You are the only people, one of the biggest government sources of fighting that. So I think it's quite important to look at that internationally, and also how have you done with this huge problem?
So, I mean, the Jobs Fund is not a mass employment program, and our unemployment situation in the country is at catastrophic levels. Yeah, what we have to do as a fund is to find innovative solutions that address the labour market barriers, right, and giving people greater access. To do that, you obviously have to use your grant. Grant is a very blunt instrument, but if you try to use it innovatively, as we have, you're able to crowd in additional funding. So the Jobs Fund was capitalized with 9 billion rand in 2011, and to date, I think we've been able to crowd in about 21 billion from other sources. The total size of the fund is now 21 billion. So against our 9, we've more than doubled the kind of money that has come in. So that, from that perspective, the Jobs Fund has been able to demonstrate that, even if you work with government, there are success stories. And if you partner in the right way, you can get positive results. Okay. We've got more than 180 projects, and the job numbers are, in excess of hundreds of thousands of jobs. But that, of course, is very little compared to the situation that we have in the country. And so the challenge for us remains is to see how we can get others to adopt the practices that we have seen as successful. So if you're going to be supporting work seekers, as an example, you've got to be sure that you're not looking for the traditional proxies to see whether a person is able to do a job, right? So don't just look for that matric certificate. Don't just look for that university degree. Look for other proxies, like the whether they volunteer, as an example, right? How do they use their time? There's other ways. So you need to break down that barrier to get people into the labour market. Then you've got to have training, but the training must be demand-led. What do I mean by that? There must be employers who are willing to take on those people, right? Yep. And so when the Jobs Fund partners with you, we want to know who your off-takers are. So if you're working in the digital space where there's lots of opportunity for young people, who are the employers that are going to take on these young people?
If you're a company providing training, for instance.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that with us demonstrating that is a better way to create stickiness in the labour market, right? Because people now have the right training, they know how to behave on the job, and there is a job for them at the end of it. There's a match between what the employer is looking for and what this person brings, right? So you're actually reducing labour costs because there isn't churn in the labour market. So that model, there's lots of new interventions and new things even with the Presidential Youth Employment Stimulus, with the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention. There are new projects now, new money is being allocated where they are adopting that model. When you're working with enterprises, same thing goes, right? You're looking for, the person might not have a track record of having 5 years financials, right? But they've run a couple of businesses and they failed and they're still at it. That talks to grit, right? So you're looking at that. You're looking at what kind of technical support do they need? So you take a holistic approach and a life cycle approach to that individual. What kind of technical support do they need? What kind of infrastructure do they have? How do you, improve that infrastructure? What kind of coaching do they need? What kind of market access before you even come to the issue of finance, right? And in the agriculture space, we surely know that access to land is not the be-all and the end-all of people being able to thrive. So having experimented and having demonstrated success in this is how you really go about incubating small farmers or even small business owners, or this is how you really improve the match between unemployed young person and the labor market. We have seen other people adopt that methodology, and we see more of that being done now.
Especially in agriculture, because it's so wide-reaching. It's not just with hands in the dirt. There's everything that's around it that also needs people. But I've got South Africa's youth unemployment rate is crazy. But how do we get the young people to want to do these things? Because if you go into a school and you ask the first 10 young people that walk past you, what do you want to be when you leave school? 8 out of those 10 people will say, I want to be a CEO. Without even knowing what a CEO does. How do we get them to be interested in starting from the bottom up?
Yeah, I think that it's a question of role models, and of course young people, like all of us, we are aspirational, right? And we see that success. We see the CEO with his German vehicle or her German vehicle, right? We see the comfy corner office, and you see all the things that accompany that kind of indicators of success. I think it starts in your home, right? And the role models that you have at home and what is being taught there. Secondly, we don't have sufficient information that filters down into our schools, right? So people don't know what the options are.
Yeah.
So we need to get that right. And people and young people must be able to experiment. So schools having food gardens. What better way to give people a sense of agriculture and what's happening there, right? So in schools, we need to have better information and better exposure to what the opportunities are, right? And that goes right to, and then of course there is the whole issue, career guidance. If you go into school today, right, how much of that is present? How many young people have even been given an opportunity to do some basic testing, right?
Internships,
or internships, just to see what are they, what is it that interests them? What is it that resonates with them? And to convert that into something practical, right? Giving young people opportunity, as you say, the on-the-job training. Where's that? That gives you exposure. That gives you life experience. So I think that our young people are interested. They just don't always know what it is that they should be interested. And it's only those things that are in your face and apparent that they then latch on to. And it's our job to get that right within our schools.
Yeah, I think it's a school problem. Also, a big part of it is like school policies and things like that. Because I've got young kids in a primary school. There's one day in a year where there's Entrepreneur Day. Then they've got to have like a little study key.
Yes.
And this guy sells marshmallows on a stick and that guy's cool drinks and whatever. But they are not actively promoting it. When we were at school, there was always somebody selling cookies or something right through. They're not promoting that anymore. They are discouraging it. And then, like my middle one, when my wife helps in the tuck shop in the sport days, she wants to help there because she enjoys that interaction. But they said that there's no kids allowed there.
We need a paradigm shift as to what success is about, right? And we need to make sure that within our schools, young children have that exposure. The amount of pressure on young adults is, we have a project in the Jobs Fund. It addresses mental health issues, right? But it's volunteers and it's young people who are trained as like first responders at school at school level. And
So that's meaning if they see a friend of theirs struggling with something, they can help.
yes, so what they do is they work with the school. There'll be a bit of a facility. They'll talk to the children. The children know that this is a place that you can reach out. So I went to one of the schools and I sat in the facility, and these people have been it's called community keepers, and they've been enormously successful because those young children feel so empowered, right? They walk in, they talk, they are happy to tell these counselors, peer counselors, that their friend needs help, okay? And one of the things that completely blew my mind was at a primary school, and I just happened to ask, so what are the common things that come up for young children? And they told me suicide. So, I mean, at a very young age, there's so much pressure on children, on young adults, and we don't have the tools and we don't have sufficient tools to address that. And so sometimes we would say, but young people are not interested. I don't think it's that. I don't think that they're not interested. I think that we are not addressing all the other challenges that they are experiencing, right? And because of that, there's an appearance of non-interest, but we haven't actually given them real options. So I think
that's
we need
interesting way of thinking.
we need to do better, and we need to do more. I'm also there's a program that I'm a part of. It's called the Basic Package of Support, right? And it's based on the EU. And they've made available a youth guarantee. And we have piloted this, and we've piloted it in Atlantis and in Orange Farm. And it really is just a safe space for young people to walk in, right? And have a sense of connection. And if need be, if they need to see a counselor, that is available. If they need to see a coach, that is available. But it is a process whereby the team goes out into a community, understands what services are available in that community, and a young person can come in and can learn about it. So the point I made earlier about information not being readily available, it is a huge, huge barrier to entry for young people. And that's what we have to do more of. Access, information availability, so people can be choiceful.
And if you don't know, you don't know.
Exactly. And you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
You know, I had a question to ask, and you've spoken towards that question actually a lot with what you were saying about the young people and needing space. And it's interesting how actually gardening and being out and practicing basic primary agriculture is so good for the soul as well.
Yes.
And you spoke about food gardens at schools, and you know, all the pressure that what else can you say? What can you say after what you've just spoken about? But it's interesting how the one hand fits with the other, is that doing something like growing plants and doing some is also extremely good for you. So the two kind of connect with each other. And it's interesting, I've had the opportunity to interview young people, a lot of young people from all across our country and all different backgrounds. And one of the things that I always ask them, so what made you go into agriculture? Normally granny or grandpa or mom or somebody had a backyard garden. And it's that connection with the soil, and that actually was something that spoke to them as teenagers, and it took them down the road into agriculture. So it's a means to an end, but it's also a kind of something that can help you with your journey. So interesting.
It's what you're exposed to, and I think that today there are so many challenges, and parents work long hours, and everything is intense. But if you're not going to be making time to expose your children, right, and to give them options, then you are going to come across this phenomenon. What would you like to do? I want to be the CEO, because that's like it's an easy option. But you haven't given that young person the opportunity to actually understand themselves. And understanding themselves is to what excites them, what motivates them. And there are little, psychometric tests and all kinds of things that you can do, because when you know yourself, then of course you can start your journey. Not so. Self-knowledge is it's one of the fundamental building blocks in deciding which direction you're going to be taking.
At one of the high schools in Worcester, I was involved there quite a bit, and they had the Mr. and Mrs. pageant every year, and they had a pre round of judging where everybody could enter. So it wasn't just the Mr. and Mrs. Populars that was in the pageant. It was everybody got interviewed. So everybody got a chance to enter, and they had to meet the panel of judges, and then that panel would select the finalists. Anyway, so there was this one boy that came across, want to be a CEO, talked with him. He had his mind set on one thing, and then a couple of kids later there was a girl that came to sit, and also her thing said, I want to be a CEO. So I said, the CEO of what? She didn't think that far. So I said, take away the money, take away all the flash and whatever. What do you like? What interests you? And she said, I like art. So I said, okay, good. I said, what if you start painting and start selling 1 or 2 art pieces? You make a little bit of money, and then you've got a little stand, and the little stand grows into a gallery, and then one gallery becomes 2. I said, before you know, you're the CEO of your own business. And you could
Yes.
She never thought about it like that. But then again, nobody has ever told her that way.
It's the thing about having time, right? Having time and to be making meaningful connections, and to invest in your children, and for us as a country to have the right things in place to invest in our youth, right? And again, it's not just about making money available. For example, we've got NSFAS, right?
Yes.
What accompanies NSFAS, right? We need to do more around the career guidance, around the assessment of young people in terms of the path that they are choosing. Is it a path because they thought they had some idea about it, but not a real detailed idea? So just guiding people a little bit more is really important.
I think if you ask 10 doctors on the street now, said if you knew what you know now, would you still become a doctor? I think 8 of them might say, I wouldn't have become a doctor.
Yeah, because those are the professions that we know, doctors and lawyers and CEOs and things like that.
And how many of them are there that went to do it because their parents said, do that because you're going to make money, and then they just hate the job?
Yeah.
But now they start.
I think that we need to do better in the way in which we invest in young people.
Najwah, I think we need to look down the road and talk about what's up.
I've got another question that's going to tie into that.
Okay, so maybe you should ask it at the same time, because I want to ask her about what's down the road for the Jobs Fund. Does it fit in with that?
Yeah. So the new buzzword on town is AI. And everybody's saying AI is going to take jobs away. And have you guys spoken about that? Does it fit into what Louise is saying? Are you planning to work down that way down the road?
Yeah, so I mean, AI does present a challenge. Most certainly there will be jobs that we will lose, but there will also be new jobs coming, right? And it's for us as a country to say, where do we want to be competitive, right? And do we have the right things to be competitive in that space, whether it be a niche market or whatever, right? And if we want to be competitive, how do we use AI? So it's about actively thinking about where you want to be competitive. And I'm saying that as a country because, we all talk about economic growth and how important that is. But if your growth is not inclusive, then what? But in order to understand, you must be very clear about which spaces you want to be competitive in, right? And if you want to be competitive, is AI a way of getting you there? Because the more competitive you are, the more opportunities there are, right? So you might be losing jobs in certain sectors, and then you will be gaining jobs in other sectors. And we need to understand what's the game plan, so that we start training our young people and others to be able to adapt, for us as a country to be agile and to respond faster, because the quicker you get to market, the more competitive you're going to be.
Yes.
Together with the quality of your project or your product. And so I think that we need to, instead of feeling alienated by AI, we need to embrace it, and we need to see how do we make that work for us. In terms of what you're asking me, we've allocated the 9 billion that the fund was initially capitalized, and now we are competing with every other government department and every other government initiative for new money. But we are open for business, and we've got a good model. We've got strength in terms of our implementation capability. I've got an amazing team, and we have been approached by donors who are interested in deploying their funding through the Jobs Fund. And of course, with the Just Energy Transition programs, there's a lot of focus on that. And so when we open up a new funding round, we probably would go and explore that space, what Just Energy Transition program would look like. The challenge, of course, is over and above making sure that we have the skills, is having commitment from the private sector to actually invest and grow their alternative businesses in those areas that is going to be impacted, right? I mean, what does it help to have lots of people trained and able, and there's no willing businesses in there? And of course, agriculture again can possibly have a very big role to play. We also want to look at the township economy. That's a major challenge, significant barriers. We know that we don't have enough new jobs being created by large firms, right? And so we're going to have to look at the informal sector and see how do we build that in order for us to reduce the level of poverty in our country. So we want to focus on that as well. And, I'm really looking forward to organizations who have good ideas, right, around just energy transition, around how to work in the informal economy. I'm looking for the intermediaries and the aggregators to put up their hands and say, listen, this is what we can do. This is what we've experimented with. So we are hopeful that on Wednesday, when the minister stands up and he makes his budget speech, that there will be some more funding for the Jobs Fund. And if there is, we will be opening up a new funding round within this year, if not two. And so I would encourage people to go to our website, www.jobsfund.org, look at the kind of work that we do, and know that, when we open up a funding round, it's going to be along those lines. We look at enterprise development, we look at enabling infrastructure, we look at support for work seekers, and we also look at how do we support institutions to build their institutional capacity. That's really new funding round, new opportunities, but we want people who are serious. There's work to be done in our country, and it takes a collective effort. And we must all be appreciative of what we can bring to the table, and we must be respectful of that. And we must, at the end of the day, it is our country that comes first. It is the people of this country that comes first. And that's what we are about as the Jobs Fund. Sustainable solutions for our country.
That's very, very well said. And that I think is going to be a very nice kind of wrap up at the end. But we have a tradition on our podcast is that normally the previous guest leaves a question for the next guest.
Okay.
We're going to get one from you as well.
We're going to get one from you, but I'm actually going to break that tradition a little because I'm going to ask you something different. And that is, on your WhatsApp photo is a picture of you with Nelson Mandela. I want to ask you about that photo. When was that taken, and when was that opportunity?
Wow. It was, I think it was around about 1998. I don't have the exact date. The picture was in Angola. We had allies pre-1994, and Madiba came to visit. and all those countries that supported South Africa. And I happened to be there, and he walked through the courtyard, and it was such a magical moment. Just to have been in his presence, absolutely inspirational. He has an aura about him, and I stood there timidly, and he walked by, and a friend now of mine said, "Wow, it'd be really great to hug this man. It'd be really great to hug this man." I'm like, "Yeah, it'd be really great to hug this man." And I just got the courage, and I went over to him and I said, "Mr. President, can I just hold you?" And he said, "Of course you can, young lady." Whoa! And I keep that, it was very long ago, but I keep that picture because it reminds me of my purpose and what's needed of all of us. And I hold on to that magic of being in the same space as Mandela.
Wow.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful note to end on, and what an inspirational note to end on, because Madiba did bring the magic, didn't he?
He absolutely did.
Cool.
We've got to get back to those days.
For sure. Thank you very much.
I think we could have gone for another 2 hours. There's a
Yes.
lot of questions, a lot of interesting things that just pop up while the conversation goes. But
Sorry, I hope I didn't talk too much.
No,
Not give you an opportunity.
not at all. Not at all.
But thank you very much.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have more of the.
I think we'll have to talk to you again.
Yes,
Thanks for
definitely.
Thanks for this opportunity.
No, it has been absolutely amazing. I mean, I still wanted to mention and tell you about, you asked us, so, the kind of impact we've had. I mean, in this book, For the Love of the Land, right, with Ivor Price and Cobus Lawrence, and they speak to Nick Serfontein from CERTNIC, and he mentions the Jobs Fund and the work that we've done with him, and how CERTNIC has grown and how the model is being adopted, not just in South Africa and elsewhere. And there's another lady in here, Alfreda, and she's a wheat farmer. And we've got this program now, the For Farmers Financial Services, right? And it talks about what is needed. So the traditional funding sources are not there, but For Farmers is a financial institution, and they are addressing that key barrier, and that is that farmers don't always have the collateral, right? And so they are putting that up and crowding in other sources of funding so that they can be there for our farmers. So yeah, there's a lot of good work that is
Wonderful to hear about that.
Yeah.
And
you should talk to For Farmers in Albrecht, and it's amazing work that they are doing.
That's what we always say. Bad news spread itself. Good news need a lot of help.
Absolutely.
And there is the amount of good news stories in our agriculture is so much more than the bad stories.
And that is innovation, with the For Farmers, right? What another key barrier for farmers? Tools and equipment, right? So we got all afforded, even though we wanted. And apart, what was attractive for us there was not just about the money and being able to use the grant to blend and, making available that collateral on behalf of farmers, right? But a creative component of the project is around the mechanization unit that they're going to set up, right? And is it about having a partnership with an organization that supplies agricultural tools and equipment, and then making that equipment available to farmers in a specific area, and then creating jobs for the maintenance of that equipment as well, right? So farmers don't have to fork out huge amounts of money to purchase their own equipment. So that is
incredible. But I do think we must wrap for now.
Okay.
I do think we'll chat again, but let's wrap it for now. So thank you so much,
Yes.
Najwah, for joining us and for bringing such positive news in a time when everybody likes to flip and dwell on the negative. It's so good to hear positive stories and the very best of luck.
And your positive energy.
Yes, and the very best of luck going forward for the Jobs Fund.
Thank you so very, very much for this opportunity. My team and I